The rural areas, the big cities do have that oomph. They're able to come in. And what's different this time is the suburbs around the big cities, especially Philadelphia.
Turn it up, Gene, for a minute, so when I go
advantages or differences with Trump losing to Hillary Clinton. The Democrats are winning the suburbs, so it's not just the inner city.
This is a pretty important night,
huh? You're really talking about. I don't think that anyone should get the idea that all elections are perfectly clean. Teddy White once says there's some states where it's always right on the mark. It's right arithmetically what people intended. Other states things go on, but the idea that they would affect the results in a presidential election or electoral college is really dishonest. Trump can say, I'm not going to honor any election where there's any irregularities. Well, that's just dishonest because there's still a result. And we shouldn't get involved in saying all elections are totally clean, therefore we should accept the results. We should say the results overwhelm the numbers. There's no question about who wins Pennsylvania this year. And I think the Democrats have also had their questions over the years about electioneering, election results. Look at Ohio back in 2004 with the Diebold company putting out those election machines. They're still being questioned by people who wonder, wait a minute, what happened with those machines? Certainly in Florida there are questions about how the Supreme Court got involved and how that decision came down. So you can always argue about it, but the results, in terms of numbers, there's no justification for Trump saying this election depends on a pluperfect count. No, it doesn't. It depends on the big numbers. And the big numbers are going to be clear coming from the big cities, and this time from the suburbs. He doesn't know what he's talking about right now. That's the problem.
I think that I think, Chris, you're exactly right. And I think that there's a real key to what he's doing here with the fact that he talks about the cities that his poll watchers need to go watch are Philadelphia and Detroit and Chicago. He keeps going on about Chicago. You know what's not up for grabs this year? Chicago. Illinois is not going to be a contested state. Whatever happens in Chicago, it's not going to make a difference. But when he says that particularly when he's not really organizing poll watchers to go to these places, he's creating in the minds of his supporters around the country this idea that there are these people in inner cities all over the country, and you know who they are, and they're the ones who are stealing this election from you good people out there. I mean, Nixon did this beautifully all through the 60s. In 1966, the people of Iowa thought that, that black rioters from Chicago were going to come ransack the streets of Iowa and steal farm kids from Iowa. And it was because they had a racial paranoia that they stoked for both law and order purposes and to be able to question the election. There's a tapestry of this. There's a way that we've done this over the years, and Trump, I think, has weaponized it at a presidential way in a way we've never seen before.
The problem is the Republican Party faces is in the big cities, which tend to sort in liberals, not just African Americans or Hispanic people, but people who tend to live in big cities tend to want to be in a diverse environment. They like the culture. They like the feel of it, the excitement of it, if you will, the enrichment of it. And so they win over. We have 69 voting divisions in Philadelphia that didn't get a single Mitt Romney vote. Not a single one. Yeah. That is not stealing votes. That's not having any. And that's why they like the voter ID law, because it does intimidate older people from going out and getting an ID card from the Department of Transportation. It's difficult to get one. In fact, the leaders in Pennsylvania, the legislature and the party, Gleason, all of them, said, we're glad we got this bill through because it's going to mean we can carry Pennsylvania. They know what they're doing. It's not about voter fraud. It's voter intimidation. We all know that.
That's exactly right.
Chris
I think we know.
Yeah.
Chris, I'm looking at the spin room. I'm seeing Rick Perry walk by in his new glasses, and I'm wondering for how many more cycles are we going to have spin rooms? What minds are being changed behind you in that room tonight that were not made up at the closing bell?
As I said, we're on airplane mode here, in so many ways. Everything that's been said tonight except Trump's latest sort of coup de grace by saying, if I lose, I still didn't lose. That line is all pretty much unmemorable because it's all back to what we said before. But I think the spin room has gotten a little tired, I think. You're right. I think your critique, which is implied, is nobody's changing anybody's minds in the spin room. By the way, we get to the audience first before they do, which is probably important, too.
Chris Matthews, thank you. I just want to read this from Senator Lindsey Graham. Like most Americans, I have confidence in our democracy and election system. During this debate, Mr. Trump is doing the party and the country a great disservice by continuing to suggest the outcome of this election is out of his hands and rigged against him. If he loses, it will not be because the system is rigged, but because he failed as a candidate. U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina. Hugh Hewitt is with us from Las Vegas. The host of the Hugh Hewitt radio show. Hugh, there's a moment in The American President when Michael J. Fox is on the phone with a member of Congress, and he says to that member of Congress, "It's just you and me." In effect, what's it going to be? So, Hugh, on what many people will see the disqualifying point of contention here, where do you come down on Donald Trump tonight?
The moment I thought he won 14 out of 15 rounds, but he hit himself in the head and knocked himself out. It is outside the norms of American political rhetoric to express a contingent acceptance of the result. As Chris Matthews noted, he might have phrased it in a way that said, if there is a state that is contested by a small number of votes, I will, like Al Gore, contest that state. But he didn't say that, and the contingent nature of his commitment to the results is unsettling to many people. I do believe he helped the down ticket a lot. I think he introduced the Project Veritas issue about who incited violence in Chicago into the mainstream. It was important. His media critique is well-founded about what gets covered. Dan Rather once said, news is where you look. But that one exchange, I believe, has already dominated the post-debate and will travel until Election Day and far beyond. And I hope that someone is speaking to him now about the need to walk that back and to clarify that you cannot be contingent about elections that are not close. I wrote a book, the title of which is If It's Not Close, They Can't Cheat. And it's absolutely true that where there might be a Florida 2000 situation where you have to go and look hard at one state in a close election, it is outside the norms of American political discourse, going back as far as I can go. Richard Nixon in 1960 had a legitimate case to contest the election and chose not to do so, because to have done so would have been to undermine the democracy. Nixon did a noble thing. But contingent rhetoric about results is not within our political norms.
Hugh Hewitt.
No, sorry, Hugh, can I just, on the Trump winning 14 or 15 rounds, I just have to ask you, because you've had such interesting back and forth with Trump directly on foreign policy. I felt like when he was talking about Mosul, and when he was talking about Iran being the big winner on Mosul, and that whole 42 commas answer that he gave, where he was trying to come up with something to say about ISIS, I felt like there's no chance that he won that round. I know you and I see things differently in terms of where we are in the ideological number line, but I think we're probably pretty close in terms of assessing whether or not people make sense on foreign policy. Don't you think he was completely incoherent on Iraq?
No, I don't, Rachel. Selena Zito, who's a terrific writer now for The Atlantic, said that a lot of people in the media take Donald Trump literally but not seriously. His supporters take him seriously but not literally. During that ramble, and it was a walkabout, it was a very long, extended walkabout, what I heard was the critique I have leveled about President Obama, that his 6-word presidency is leading from behind, red line, and JVs. And what he was talking about was the vacuum that led to Mosul having to be fought, and whether or not it is strategically correct to telegraph your next punch. That critique has been around for a long time. So I thought that the base, and indeed some Americans who are now fighting, I was disturbed that neither candidate mentioned that thousands of Americans are actually in the battle for Mosul, in harm's way tonight. We ought to be praying for them. But I think people hear differently when they talk about foreign policy based upon their understanding of how we got where we are. And so I have to disagree with you on that. I do believe that it deserves a much fuller exploration of the details, and much of what was said tonight will not be understood because a lot of it, as they say in a courtroom, evidence not in consideration. They had not made the argument fully, but nevertheless, the people who are upset with President Obama's foreign policy and Secretary of State Clinton in Libya, Syria, the Russian reset button, which is the worst photo taken by a Secretary of State in American history with Sergei Lavrov, is nevertheless going to be understood by them. So I think we have to agree to disagree on that, but I don't think we disagree on the rhetoric.
I hear you. I hear that you could make sense out of what he says. I maintain that he actually literally made no sense, but I think we're not far off on that.
Did he, Hugh, this is Gene Robinson, just very quickly. The question was,
you cite the poll that says 60% feel the economy is rigged, and I am
Oh,
one
this
who
is gonna be
believes
good,
that the
huh?
biggest single issue facing us in every mature economy is how you guarantee that people who work hard can get ahead, how you give them the best chance to get ahead in this changing economy. I think that's a real issue. But if you're going to cite the polls, then you have to accept the rest of what the poll says, which is that 60% don't think he has the temperament to be president. 60%, on a series of measures of presidential preparedness, don't feel he's qualified. So that was what he had to work on tonight. If he wants to get from point A to point B, that's what he had to do tonight, is reassure people.
You've got the experience, and it's bad
That is a great line. No, that is a great line. And the 30-year argument is a good argument. But that is not a 90-minute debate. And given what else he said, it's sort of like that old thing about how's the play otherwise, Mrs. Lincoln, you know?
And she had a great comeback, I thought, again, to the 30-year answer, where she said in the 1970s, I was down in Arkansas, you were being sued for housing discrimination. In the 1980s, so she went through decade by decade. So I thought that whole refrain, she was clearly ready for that answer.
I'm sure that was right off the top of your head.
Anderson, if I can just say, I think there are 535 people who are watching tonight who really now have an issue on their hands. And I'm thinking of the 100 Senate Republican candidates and 435 Republican candidates for the House of Representatives. Individuals like Pat Toomey in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, who thus far have really danced in terms of, are you for or against this guy? And they now are going to be asked the question tonight or tomorrow, when Donald Trump is unwilling to say that he'll accept the outcome of the election, what about you?
And they're going to say, I'll say the same thing that I said when Al Gore.
I don't think so.
No, they're not.
I don't think so.
And therein lies the problem with Washington, and that's it,
Well,
right
And
there.
one thing we haven't,
That is it.
There's one thing we haven't talked about when you talk about it, which is, for the first time, Donald Trump used Spanish. He spoke a Spanish word only to insult and smear and stereotype Latino immigrants and no other immigrants. He said we have some bad hombres. The only time this man has used Spanish in the entire election was used to stereotype and smear Latino immigrants. Not all immigrants, but Latino immigrants. I thought that was horrible. And if you look at Twitter,
nice
that's going to be
leather,
another reason that the
dress on
Republican
her.
Party
Huh? See
is
that,
having
Gino?
a very difficult time being a party
This
for
is
all
where
the
we get
country.
into this politically correct.
No, it's not politically correct.
Nonsense.
It
Is it
Oh, nonsense. Please, America, this is nonsense.
It is just gotta let me finish my point. Gotta let me finish my point. He was not talking about. Let's put context here instead of bringing out two words. Context. Sabine Durden lost her son at the hand of an illegal immigrant. He would still be here today if the laws were enforced.
But you
And is that man a bad hombre? A bad man? A bad hombre? Whatever you want to call that man.
You cannot do it.
It wasn't all immigrants, and that's where context is so
Hold on a
important.
second. First
He was
of all,
talking about the immigrants who have come into this country. They're a minority, yes, 100%. They're a small number, but nevertheless, there are people who would still be alive
There's something
today
wrong.
had the laws been
There's
enforced.
something wrong.
Americans have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Everyone.
Absolutely.
And
And
no
I'll
one
tell
should
you
die at the hands of an illegal immigrant.
No one should die at the hands of
Anyone.
anybody.
Exactly.
And I tell you what, there's something
Unless
wrong.
they're a baby.
Hold on a second. There's
Unless
something
they're a
wrong.
baby and they're nice.
There's something wrong when you take funerals and you politicize funerals. I've gone to plenty of them. I've seen people killed by police. I've seen people killed by, I've seen African American kids killed by other African American kids. I've seen Latino kids killed by other Latinos. I've seen people killed by people with papers, without papers. The reality is, when you start cherry picking, and you say, well, I'm going to pick these particular ones and use that to beat up a whole community, that is disgusting, it's wrong, and people understand what you're doing. It's not right. Let's play this again, just for those who maybe didn't see it. Let's play the moment, the moment that's gotten a lot of coverage online.
We're going to secure the border, and once the border is secured, at a later date, we'll make a determination as to the rest. But we have some bad hombres here, and we're going to get them out.
What was your reaction?
No, this is not politicizing someone's death ban. This is really important here. If we want to talk about picking and choosing which deaths to care about, President Obama has cared about certain men who have died at the hands of police officers. Your idea about politicizing deaths, I assume it applies to your own president. It's not politicizing deaths to care about a certain group of people. And Donald Trump cares about the fact that kids in New Hampshire have died of heroin that has been brought in here by illegal immigrants. There are people who have lost.
My father immigrated
One at a time, Patty.
from Mexico illegally twice, was deported twice, came back the third time legally. To me, I was born here. I'm an American citizen. To me, that was very offensive. You heard me when we were watching it in the green room. I was aghast at it. That's just offensive. It's offensive to Hispanics. It's offensive to Mexicans. Bad hombre.
Oh, come on, Patty. Patty, you're an American. I'm an American. I've heard that phrase all my life. That has nothing to do with
Why do you
Donald
think
Trump.
where do you hear that phrase? Where do you hear it?
No, this line has been an American.
Where do you hear that phrase?
American television westerns in the 1950s. He's a bad hombre.
1950s.
My goodness.
By the way, I'm not sure 1950s American television is the best benchmark for what is good language.
I have never heard that. I have never heard that compared to, say, the N-word. Right?
Okay.
Right?
But for Jeffrey, why do you think he used that phrase? Why didn't he just say bad dude? Why didn't he just say bad dude?
Because there are dudes that would be offended if you say so. Because somebody would come up with this.
Specifically use Spanish in that instance?
Well, what's wrong with it? There's nothing wrong with it.
So why do you think he did it, though?
Just because it's colloquial, it's in the American language.
No one says that. No one says that, Jeffrey.
You don't know enough people.
Donald Trump has defended the language he uses and says about women, I don't say things like that. That's not what I do. Well, tonight, Patty was very offended, and I think she has a lot more credibility than I do on that. All right, and if she's offended, I'm offended.
I can't even believe what I'm hearing. That we're living in such a high offense culture that when you call someone who has killed American citizens bad hombres, and we're going to critique the language you use, two words you chose to use. This is such a high offense culture, and this is why, by the way, I want to point out really quick, this is why Donald Trump won this nomination, because Americans around this country are fed up with the high offense culture that we have.
So here's the deal. This is not about being a high offense country. I agree with you. There are some people who are just chronically aggrieved, and no matter what you do, they're gonna. I'm in meetings with them all the time. Trust me. So I get what you're talking about, but this is not that. This is something else. This is a sense that we've not yet heard him say very many positive things about the contribution of the Latino immigrant community. We have an. Let him finish. He doesn't trumpet it. He had an opportunity to say nice stuff tonight. We talked about immigration tonight. He had a huge opportunity to try to repair some damage with a community. He could have said, listen, we got some bad ones, but let me tell you a little bit about the good ones, the ones who are making a difference, who are making a contribution. He did like George W. Bush used to do. He didn't do that. And then to put the cherry on top of the awful Sunday, he then says there's some bad hombres, which sounds to people for whom
politically correct.
No.
It's offensive, Jeffrey. Period. End of story. It's offensive.
Let's stop talking about how offensive it is. He stood beside the Mexican president and praised the contributions of the Mexican American community. He's done this time and time again. There are so many good immigrants in this country, but there are some very bad ones, and we never get to the root of the problem because we're all upset about the term bad hombre.
Let's stop talking about how offensive it is.
But I want people to see it too.
He was supposed to broaden his base tonight.
But leaving it to his surrogates to essentially talk about this. I would also note, we did interview RNC Chair Reince Priebus, who has been silent the last couple of weeks. I asked him about that, where have you been? And he said, hey, I'm here talking to you now. I'm out here now, defending Donald Trump and essentially saying he was going to clarify the remarks that Donald Trump made on stage, in saying that Trump would accept the results of an election, again, if there weren't widespread issues. So let me see if we can
get
Donald Trump Jr. here. We're going to see if Eric Trump is floating around and a couple of the other folks out here. We'll come back to you.
We'll put it on tape. We'll come back and show that. I have to get to Chris Matthews, who has two special guests. Chris?
Yeah, I've got the #1 surrogate for Donald Trump and also the campaign manager for Donald Trump. Ladies first, what about this kerfuffle now? It's bigger than a kerfuffle about whether Donald Trump will accept the results of this election. Will he?
Yes, because he's going to win it. So, of course...
How about if he doesn't? Will he accept those results?
He says that, we all say absent irregularities and widespread fraud and any kind of mischief that is reported, that, sure, but he's got to adjudicate the time. Al Gore had already conceded the election to George W. Bush in 2000, Chris. We remember the night well. And then he called to retract his concession.
Right, he did, because
and
the
it went on
numbers
for
came
6
in
weeks.
different
It went
than he
all the way
thought.
to the United States Supreme Court.
I understand that. That happens. Okay.
No, but it does happen. It happened in our lifetime. It happened 16 years ago. So I'm sure had you asked Al Gore sitting here, he would have said, sure, I'll accept the results, and then he did not.
Donald Trump seems to be saying, when asked this question in a broader sense, he says the media is supporting the other candidate. Will he say that the election was stolen? Will he say it's not a legitimate election because the media, he says, supports the other candidate? Will he say that's the grounds for denying the results of the election? Because the media, he says, supports... See, he's done two things all the time. He keeps saying the media, then he says election results. Does the media have anything to do with whether he decides to accept the legitimacy of this election? Anything to do with that?
First of all, legally it would have nothing to do with it. So the only way you can challenge the election...
Okay.
Has
he said this?
Election fraud. Illegally, the only way you can challenge it is if there's some kind of election fraud or a miscount, which is what Gore did. We didn't get a presidential discovery. He may, in his heart of hearts, feel that the media stole it from him by the way they treated him. There's nothing you can do about that.
You don't think he'll call foul in that regard?
Well, you can call foul without doing any good. But I mean, look, there are times you feel you've been treated fairly, and times you feel you haven't been treated fairly. He feels that he's been treated very unfairly during this election. I agree with him. But that's, I think that's different than the issue of, do you accept the election results? If he wins by 2 million or she wins by 2 million, well, then they both are going to have to accept it. If it's a 400-vote election, there's going to be a recount.
We've had all these elections since the 70s, 90s. Why in this election is one of the candidates saying, I'll accept this if it's clean? I mean, most candidates don't feel they have to say that. Why is he saying that?
Well, I think there are indications of a lot of fooling around by the...
Where?
Well, this whole Veritas thing, where they actually are paying people to create violence.
Well, how does that say the election count will be wrong?
To what extent would they go?
But does that suggest that the Electoral College will be affected in its results? Where do you see any gross example of where there's going to be a crooked election? I don't see it.
All these people who are registered that don't exist, or that they're not those addresses, all the dead people that are still on the ballots.
That's new. Well, that's new.
Voter fraud. I mean,
yeah, we had that back in Chicago in 1960. There were dead people that voted in that election.
I had it in New York in 1989.
Okay, so how's that affecting the results, though? Because we're talking about who won and who lost, and will there be a concession speech or not?
But Chris, hold on. This man has been talking from day one of his candidacy, 1.5 years now, about the rigged, corrupt system all the way around. He's given us many examples of that throughout. He's running against a woman, probably the most corrupt candidate to ever run for president.
That's language. That's election language.
But this is important because only somebody who's so outside the system as Donald Trump is can legitimately say they're going to take a better look at the system, that they're going to turn it upside down, and this is part of that. But he's been reading these reports about the dead people in the rolls, the irregularities. But look, you've got to take his whole comment together. You've got 96% of the donations from working journalists going to Hillary Clinton. That's not even a close
I accept all that analysis. You're right to say that. But my question is, why did he make the headline here tonight? And it will be the headline that he's not ready to accept the results of this election.
The headline should be that Hillary Clinton was rattled and Donald Trump turned in a masterful debate performance, won it, and the polls are going to tighten as a result of it. I mean, he held her to account all night long for her 30 years of being in government. He held her in account on the Russian reset. That was her idea with the goofy go across to the podium with the gadget. Syria, where 80,000 kids have been innocently slaughtered. Libya, certainly. Benghazi. I mean, he held her to account for the lack of jobs up in upstate New York. Those are the headlines to me.
He said this, I'm going to hold the American people in suspense as to whether I'm going to ratify the results of this election. Why did he say that? I'm going to hold the American people in suspense.
Well, that's true.
Why would he say that? You've never said it. You've never said it.
We are in suspense.
How many elections are contested? Numerous elections.
You beat Ruth Messenger on the West Side. What do you mean, close elections?
That wasn't even close. I won by 18%.
Okay, you did.
When I lost by 2, there were a lot of people that wanted me to contest it. I decided not to, but that's when I might have contested. I might have contested.
You think this election? You think what he said? Honestly, you both guys know. You believe this is about a questionable result.
I think you're talking about this, your station, because he knocked her out tonight.
Yeah, is that right? That's straight up my motive.
He knocked her out tonight when she said you have violence at your rallies, and he said yes, you paid for it.
Chris, how many years, how many decades have I I've been working on pro-life messaging, and I've been waiting for a Republican nominee for president, and frankly for vice president, because Mike Pence did the same thing 2 weeks ago masterfully, to talk about the fact that the Democratic Party is so extreme on this issue. They say they're pro-choice. They say it's women's health. They are for abortion anyone, anytime, anywhere.
Are you surprised
She's
that your
defend
candidate
against
uses
non-with
graphic
abortion.
language about partial birth, the child, if you will, ripped out of the womb days before delivery? Are you surprised to use that kind
No,
of
I wasn't surprised at all, and I was really happy he did it, only because people should know that you can't just call yourself pro-choice and not realize what that means in today's Democratic Party. This is not Bill Clinton's Democratic Party in 1992, Chris, where he wanted a centrist, moderate, southern governor, and he said abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. Read the Democratic Party platform. There are no restrictions, no regulations,
Are you
and we know too
comfortable
much
with this
about
language
science
about
and
abortion
medicine.
rights? You're pro-choice.
I am, but not for killing. I consider that killing babies. You're killing a baby.
There are other babies that have been born in 7th, 8th months, so
What's the difference between the day before and the day after?
That's right. That's right. And I really like the fact that Mike Pence and Donald Trump both shine a light on it, because you have all these Republicans usually hunkering under the desk hoping that the shrapnel won't hit them, and he held her to account on that. He held her to account on the Second Amendment. I thought that was a really low point for her. She looked very defensive.
Very strong language. Thank you. Back to you guys. Back to you, Brian.
Chris, thank you so much there to react to, and yet...
Can we just stop this for a second?
Right.
Because that was absolutely, completely, and totally insane. Can I just express that mild feeling? That was absolutely, completely, and totally insane. I give credit to my calm, cool, and collected friend Chris Matthews for that. But for them to say that that Donald Trump saying he will not accept the results of the election is totally normal. This is what people do all the time. Rudy Giuliani was right there himself. This is normal politics. And by the way, it was a knockout and it was a masterful performance.
On that point, and by the way, only Donald Trump, who's been outside the system, can say the whole system is corrupt.
Right,
Say the election is rigged.
But he attacked this network and our focus on it. Here's Laura Ingraham, very, very well-known conservative. Donald Trump, should have said he would accept the results of this election. There's no other option unless we're going to recount again. I mean, this is not a vast left-wing conspiracy to say that this was a lights-out moment in American politics. This was the headline because this was the headline. And again, it's Donald Trump stepping and smashing and crushing Donald Trump's road to the White House.
We have a poll report from inside the room. This is a pretty well-behaved debate audience compared to the other two that we've had. There was a few little moments, and Chris Wallace is right on it, admonishing people whenever they made noise, but there was an uncontrollable, audible gasp within the room when Trump made the comments about not accepting the results of the election. That was not because those people were a group of MSNBC employees tittering about the fact that Hillary Clinton was losing this debate and we better change this narrative. The idea that the campaign manager, Kellyanne Conway, who's a nice person and a normal Republican, and Rudy Giuliani, who was seen as a Republican leader for a long time, are sitting there playing that violin song to themselves saying, yep, we're winning, can't wait till I pick my cabinet seat. I mean, that was just absolutely bizarre.
In their defense, without the disqualification, and I do think it was a disqualification, they do feel they were involved in debate prep, and they do, I think, want to take a little bit of credit for an improved performance, which is true.
The first 25 minutes were definitely better.
You can't separate the headline from the rest.
No, from the fact that he was screaming wrong, and what a nasty woman, and grabbing his microphone the whole time, and back with the sniffling and the insanity on Mosul. I mean, this is...
no stamina.
Them saying he nailed it is 40.
I'm merely trying to stick up for 32 very nice people in Columbus, Ohio, who have agreed to stay up with us. Democratic pollster Chris Kofinas has put together a focus group tonight of 32 very nice citizens of Columbus, Ohio, where it's late for them, and they've already worked all day, and they've stood by for us. So, Chris, tell us about your findings, and far from this bunch, far from Vegas, how did it go over in Ohio?
Well, it was a mixed reaction in terms of who won the debate. It kind of split down the middle in a sense. You had 11 who thought that Hillary won the debate. You had 10 who thought that Trump won the debate, and the rest, another 11 that thought it was neither. But what was interesting was, as much as they were kind of torn and they kind of kept yo-yoing back and forth as to who was doing well, in the beginning Hillary, then it was Trump, and then it was kind of tied, and then Hillary again. In terms of who moved, in terms of actual votes, well, here's what's interesting. You had 11 that went to Hillary, 5 that went to Trump, and the rest of the room that's still undecided. And what's really fascinating about this, when the conversation we were just having, what really was interesting is the missed opportunity that Trump had in this debate. What really hurt him was the negativity, the personal attacks. And you saw that when I asked, who was more negative in this debate, it was 21 Trump, 1 Hillary, 10 thought they were both kind of equally negative. And that kind of speaks to the larger problem that Trump has, that every time he tries to connect, and he does connect, especially with his audience on issues like trade, and speaks to the frustrations about the economy, he ends up being his own worst enemy. He starts making the personal attacks, he starts interrupting, and that just loses people, and it just reinforces this narrative that's out there that he's just not ready to be president.
Chris, do you have a microphone, and is there a 4-person that emerged from both camps that we could just hear from briefly?
Sure. Michelle, give me your thoughts. What did you think overall in terms of the debate, how the candidates did?
I thought they were equally, the debate went well. The thing that stuck out for me is when Trump was asked if he would concede, and he basically said no. I felt like it was disrespecting the democracy of the United States.
Okay. Bill, what stood out for you in the debate one way or the other?
Well, I think you said it was blown opportunities on the part for Donald Trump. I think Hillary did a good job keeping her poise under fire, and I think that Mr. Trump blew a lot of good opportunities to really put himself in a better position, like you said.
Jay, what stood out for you in terms of the debate?
I think that both candidates had missed opportunities. I think it could have been a much better debate if the candidates would have stuck to the issues, explained their reasons, and explained their platform. And that way the American people could understand where the candidates were coming from and make a decision based off of the actual issues.
So everyone kind of has an idea in terms of how the room's divided. We had folks on the left, to my left, that leaned Hillary. The folks in the middle were all undecided, and the folks to the right leaned Trump. I want to just ask the folks, everyone in the room, a question again that I asked earlier. If Trump had been more positive in this debate, not in this election, not just this debate, how many in this room think that Trump would be winning this election right now? Raise your hands. That is nearly the entire room. So what's amazing to me is that, depending on what happens, if the polls that we're seeing, the battleground polls stay where they are, this was another missed opportunity. This was a missed opportunity in terms of an election, because when you speak to these voters who are undecided or leaning one way, they do want change. The problem is they haven't bought the change that Trump is selling.
Pollster Chris Kofinas, a favor for me, please thank everyone in that room on our behalf.
Yeah, seriously.
Nicole Wallace was in Ohio this week. The rest of us are planning trips there multiple days with our families to repay them their kindness. But thank them for their time, their attention, and their opinions. And that last show of hands, Nicole Wallace, is the Republican frustration in microcosm.
And that's what I was just saying in my somewhat feeble defense of Rudy and Kellyanne. And frankly, everyone that's been a part of the Trump effort has expressed some degree of that exact sentiment that you saw in that room. That he is the one who gets in his own way. And never before in my party has someone been in more control of their own destiny. Hillary Clinton's liabilities are the known knowns. I mean, she's been on the stage. And his best message in his advisor's view is to rail against long-time establishment politicians in both parties. That's how he won the nomination, and that was his opportunity in a general. That he turns in a performance that for him was better than his other two, and then blows his own performance, blows himself up. I called him a suicide bomber last time. He blew himself up tonight by that doubling down. And Chris Wallace, I thought almost threw him a lifeline. Like, you sure you want to say that now? Yeah. You just said you want to accept the American democracy.
Here's why it's important that you give a different answer to that. Here, why don't you give me a different answer to that?
And that their answer is now, well, Gore didn't. I mean, that is not going to win back that room in Columbus. Forget about us. We do not determine elections.
Yeah.
But those
They
voters
do.
in Ohio, they decide.
Imagine what this was like to watch. Forgive me, Gene, for 1 second, but we have a remote from overseas. For Richard Engel, this is day 3 of the battle for Mosul. Richard has been covering that, which includes thousands of American men and women. Richard, your reaction to the discussion you heard tonight?
Well, before we get into Mosul, I think we're now really understanding what kind of foreign policies the two candidates are championing. Secretary Clinton describes what is really a continuation of President Obama's policy, which is to drive ISIS out of Mosul, then to continue on to Raqqa. She has this add-on of a no-fly zone in Syria. That has been something that has been debated, but there probably wasn't time for it with this current administration, or there wasn't the will for it. What we've seen from Mr. Trump is an embrace of strongmen. I think he will embrace dictators around the world. He was praising Putin. He was praising Assad for being effectively much smarter than Washington has been. Now on to Mosul. He specifically referenced Mosul, and he said that even though this operation is still in its early days, it's been a lot harder than people expected. Take a listen.
We'll take Mosul eventually. By the way, if you look at what's happening, much tougher than they thought. Much, much tougher, much more dangerous, going to be more deaths than they thought.
Well, in the early days, it actually hasn't been tougher than people expected. I've spoken to American commanders, and they say so far it's going a little bit better than expected. But Donald Trump did have one point that I think a lot of people would agree with. Why advertise this campaign? Why tell ISIS that you're coming? Why make this such a moment of anticipation? ISIS has had a lot of time to dig in. They've already found some tunnels. There's concern that ISIS could use chemical weapons, crude homemade chemical weapons. And if this turns out to be a very bloody campaign, if there are hundreds of thousands of refugees, if there are some crude chemical weapons used, I think Trump can go back and say, I told you we should never have alerted ISIS that we were coming. On the issue of
like
the
they
nukes,
couldn't figure it out.
he continues to be very loose in his talk about nuclear weapons. He was talking about how the United States needs more warheads to balance Russia, and then he was talking about how he never said that specifically Saudi Arabia and South Korea shouldn't have or should have nuclear weapons. He has said that in the past. That was a clear contradiction, and I think we have those clips lined up.
Our country cannot afford to defend Saudi Arabia, Japan, Germany, South Korea, and many other places. We cannot continue to afford. She took that as saying nuclear weapons. Look, she's been proven to be a liar on so many different ways. This is just another lie.
Well, I'm just quoting you when
There's
you were
no
asked
quote.
about
You're not going to find a quote from me.
So you have no problem with Japan, South Korea having nuclear weapons?
At some point, we have to say, you know what? We're better off if Japan protects itself against this maniac in North Korea. We're better off, frankly, if South Korea is going to start to protect itself.
Saudi Arabia, nuclear weapons?
Saudi Arabia, absolutely.
So he says, you're never going to find that quote from me. That quote was on national television. That quote wasn't even that long ago. And this is the problem. You can have mistruths about a lot of things, about your record, not put out your taxes, what have you, delete emails, but you don't want to be inconsistent about nuclear weapons policy and about nuclear proliferation. This has enormous consequences. You don't want to get this one wrong. You don't want to be either misremembering things or lying about them or not quoting yourself accurately when it comes to nuclear weapons.
Richard Engel and Erbil, we're at 6:35 a.m. I'm told I have time for exactly one follow-up with you, and it would be this. Why did we announce so far in advance the offensive was coming to Mosul?
The citizens.
Well, it depends on how cynical you want to be, frankly, Brian. In one sense, I think it was politically timed. I think the Mosul campaign, there was an objective to get this done while President Obama is still in office. The rise of ISIS in Iraq and Syria, the birth of the so-called caliphate, has probably been the blackest stain on the Obama administration. And I think there was a determination to get this operation underway and to get Mosul liberated from ISIS while President Obama is still in office. And I think they wanted to project that. And down the road, if this operation goes badly, that could be a serious liability. If it goes well, then President Obama will have a feather in his cap. He can say, I wasn't weak on ISIS. We just took back Mosul. We eliminated the ISIS caliphate while I'm still in office. But if it goes badly, there's a risk.
All of it, of course, under the official banner of an Iraqi-led effort with American air intelligence and artillery backup. Richard Engel, our chief foreign correspondent, Erbil, Iraq, just after dawn there. Richard, as always, you've been there for us all three of these debates. We so appreciate knowing you're listening and can fact-check us on the other side. A break for our coverage. We're back with more right after this.